If you know me, you know this is really saying something. This is probably one of the most irresponsible videos I will ever have made. If you are a victim, family of a victim of any shooting, any school shooting, I wouldn't watch this in an emotional state. Unless you are like beyond reconciliation. I don't know. If this video makes you mad and that helps, I guess that's fine. But this is not gonna be I'm gonna be very frank. I'm gonna talk about this. I really don't want to be glib about it. That is kind of the way I usually approach subjects on this channel. But I wouldn't be surprised if I slipped into saying things that don't seem very sensitive. So if you are looking for sensitivity, this is not where you're going to get that. You're going to get someone trying to rationalize what's happened. Because to me, it makes sense. And I don't mean it makes sense like that what the person did is justified or anything like that. No, it's insane. It's not something that should be happening. But I understand why it's happening. And I guess the best way for me to start is with my credentials on the subject. I wanted to commit suicide throughout a period of my childhood and especially my teenage years, mostly because of bullying and feeling out of place inside of society, feeling like I just had no place. And the only reason that I never became more violent, I would say there's two reasons. One, I was very pain averse, but the reason that I had not developed a pain threshold is that my parents were not causing me any physical pain, which is uncommon among like anyone who's ever existed, actually. You know, my parents were like the first generation of you don't ever touch your kids, you know, regardless. It's not a punish. There's no physical punishment, you know. And they really weren't very good at finding another way to discipline us either. We just kind of weren't very disciplined, me and my brothers, I mean. But I have always had a good enough relationship with my parents that even during periods of time where I felt really miserable about my life, felt like I couldn't communicate with them, couldn't really trust them to communicate with, you know, like I felt as though I couldn't say anything to them for a long time. I didn't view it as like their fault all the way, you know, and a lot of that is because I'd communicated with them enough to know what they had been through, know their life. I know my parents' lives. I know what their upbringings were. And there's mutual respect between me and my parents. You'll notice directly behind me all this stuff. All this right here, this is all my dad's racing, on foot and bike. All the races he's participated in, his like flag of his ID thing. This here is a Krampus head that my mom has made out of trash, mostly because of the fact that I kept coming home with grocery bags instead of using the reusable bags that she uses, and eventually she was like, well, if I have to look at all this trash, I'm gonna find something artistic to do with it. I respect that my parents do things, that my dad works out, you know, here's all his workout equipment. My parents spend a lot of time in this garage. Now, me and my mom spend a lot of time out in this garage smoking weed and not really doing much of anything. I wouldn't say that life has been especially exciting. Both of us are people who are in a lot of physical pain. She's been through cancer. She's old. When I was in elementary school, my mom actually was in charge of a Cub Scout group, and in that group was a kid who I had considered myself friends with for the time that we were in Scouts together, named Philip Bay. And he was probably autistic. He was somebody who just would keep talking, and regardlessly if you literally told him I don't care what you're saying, he would just keep going on. He was very obsessed with Star Wars and Daft Punk, which a lot of autistic people are. Warhammer, even though he was like 9. Philip was always a very bossy and bratty kid that nobody liked dealing with or talking to. His mom kind of just passively let him do whatever. She was very hands off. She was a single mother. The parents had divorced. I don't know what his relationship with his dad was like. I never met him. Philip learned how to build bombs and was about to shoot up his high school. He was caught. He went to prison for 15 years. Within 5 years of being out, he went back to prison for child pornography. So one of my childhood friends was also an almost school shooter. I didn't know that until I think this must have happened when I was almost graduated, because I assume he was in the same grade I was, unless he was held back a year. But I was probably 17 when I heard news of this. I think he was a senior. Maybe we were juniors. It feels strange because I immediately felt tremendously older than him just by the fact that he did that. Because I had gone through a phase when I was like 14 where, things were really dark for me, and I was really deep in gender dysphoria. I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't really have any friends for a while. But I had the internet, and at the time when the internet was kind of young, it really wasn't nearly as vicious as it's become. Unless you were on like 4chan or something, which was known for being vicious, and that's why people went there. Like, I spent time on very wholesome forums, where like, sure, you might get like catfished or bullied by some people. And I would even say I was bullied on forums, but like, I always understood why I was being bullied, because it was always about my attitude. It was always about the way I wrote and the fact that I was so edgy. And it was people kind of telling me like, calm the fuck down, And now the internet is always trying to ramp you up because that gets profit, that draws more attention. So, we've created this atmosphere where like this place that people who have no place in society are running to try to find solidarity are going there. And it's worse than just traumatic. Like, I had traumatic experiences at 14 on the internet because of the fact that I was talking to people a lot older than me who were connecting with these experiences, but they are also, even more sort of troubled in their own ways. Like, I was at 14 talking to like a 30-year-old woman and telling her I was like gonna try to marry her and take her away from the fact that she like still like was under her mom's like command in a weird way. I don't know. I had the first person I ever considered my boyfriend was the 17-year-old when I was 14, which in retrospect I thought was kind of creepy, because he knew like I had said I was 14. So it wasn't like, it wasn't like, you know what I'm trying to say. So, that stuff, while traumatic, and I've met plenty of people with way, way, way worse experiences on the early internet because they were just more open, they also learned a lot more about their place in society. They learned a lot more about what people would want from them, what people would expect. I eventually learned that people like when I do analysis. That's why I do it. Because like I just straight up got more props for that than anything else. It was a Fully Cooley analysis I wrote in 2009 that like got more views and more comments than anything else I've ever done. That's what set me up to have like a place in the world. I've read this girl's manifesto, this shooter's manifesto. If you don't know what I'm talking about, because I didn't really introduce the topic at the top, this is about the fact that there was a school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin yesterday, and the 15-year-old girl who did it wrote a 6-page manifesto, and there's a photo of her provided by her boyfriend, who was an internet boyfriend who didn't even live in the same country and had never met her. I don't know how old that guy was, probably around her age, but she's a femcel. And the fucking diatribe she wrote, it reads just like Elliot Rodgers. It's called like War on Humanity. She literally, the gist of her writing is people are scum and therefore they deserve to die. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to kill myself because I have no place in this world. And second of all, I'm going to take people with me because she literally just thought that was more virtuous. She was like, less people is better world. So if I'm going out, I'm taking people with me, you know, starting with, I guess, whoever I hate the most at school. I don't know who she ended up shooting. I just know it was like a teacher, student were in critical condition. Like 6 people got injured. Sorry, I've got like, when I hear these stories, I can see the whole thing in my head. Like I can see the entire thing play out every time. I can always imagine exactly what they're doing. And it, you know, it's like, I always try to picture like, what am I going to do to escape this scenario or to do something about it? I mean, this girl, suicide was her main goal. So like, she was always just going to empty the clip and finish herself off. You know, it was just take out as many as I can within the fucking limited supply of what I brought with me. Mumkey Jones, who I used to work with, is a YouTuber who did a lot of study on Elliot Rodger into his, you know, incredibly long manifesto. And Elliot was upset about not getting laid, mostly, and about the way that his parents had treated him. And Natalie, or Samantha, as she seemed to be preferred to be called, I guess, she basically said that like humans had devalued the concept of romance to the point that she cannot believe in it. There's a lot of contradiction, obviously. Like, she was in a relationship, she like mentions friends, but the fact that she just thinks that she's going to lose them. And I understand why she was in that mentality, because like, so the way she described her life and her relationship to her parents is deeply chaotic. And ultimately, she puts most of the blame on her dad. She's like, my dad's a piece of shit, and he made me a piece of shit, and, you know, so fuck him, I'm gonna go do this stuff. I don't know anything about this dude. You know, I'm not gonna put any, I mean, obviously it's always the fucking parents' fault, you know, but like, if you're gonna blame somebody, blame the fucking parents. You failed. You know, you really failed. You really fucked this. You really fucked up. If the parents are watching this, you really fucked up. I'm not sympathetic towards the parents of a school shooter, because it's always half the manifesto is fuck dad, and mom too. You know, mom because she's in a coma, dad because he's a psychopath. When a dude's getting bullied and shoots up his school and they blame it on Marilyn and the heroin, where were the parents at? And look where it's at, middle America. Now it's a tragedy. Now it's so sad to see an upper class city having this happening. And they blame Eminem because I rap this way. My mind is a very chaotic place, and I use writing and analysis and speech as a way of organizing that chaos and trying to find through lines that other people can get something out of it. And the reason that my mind is so chaotic is that I moved all the time growing up. My parents had moved 7 times by the time I was 3, all up and down the California coast. That was when my dad was still in the Navy. Then they toured with Lollapalooza 2 summers in a row with me and my younger brother at age 3 and 2. So 36 states. Then they moved to Virginia. My memory starts there for the most part, being like my 4th birthday in Pocosin, I guess. I grew up mostly in Hampton Roads, but we still moved all the time, mostly because the family's financial situation would change, and my dad would totally change his whole entire lifestyle. My parents both they went through lots of identity crises that I watched unfold. They went through lots of drug problems that I watched unfold, and not really understanding it at the time, but in retrospect, I get it all now. Because once I became depressed when I was in my early teens, mostly over body dysmorphia, but I didn't understand that really at all at the time, I got heavy into psychology and philosophy, because that was where my dad had been looking for answers. You know, he had fallen into like a midlife crisis in his early 30s and turned to spirituality. So I had picked up that and read a lot of the books and started reading into more of the stuff that he was reading into. And like in the early internet, there wasn't a ton of information online, but it's expanded tremendously. So every year I learned more and more and more about psychology, more and more and more about philosophy, more and more about culture, more and more about the way the world works. And again, it makes it so I can understand things like this better, even if I feel emotionally tremendously more distant. Like, I could never imagine committing these kinds of crimes. I can't even imagine committing suicide unless my body really falls apart. Like, I don't make enough money to take care of myself, because I won't get into my present tense trauma, but like living with a 92-year-old who doesn't really know who he is anymore and is like just kind of hoping to die, I want to be able to have enough wits about me that I could. I understand. Like, I completely understand why Hunter Thompson killed himself. The man could barely speak. Like, his fucking body was fried. He had lived hard his whole life. He'd had the shit kicked out of him. You know, he'd really lived a hard life. I have the opportunity not to do that. Like, I've got a lot of pain from not taking care of myself for a period of time, but I have the willpower and the strength that if capitalism doesn't crush me, if it doesn't decide that I am unworthy, I might be able to make it farther than Hunter Thompson did into life. But like, I completely understand why, if you're like, I can't fucking do anything anymore, like, this sucks. Earlier this year, my autistic cousin, set himself on fire and spent 17 hours dying. I've thought about it quite a bit since then. And it's the one that I feel the most personal responsibility towards, even though, like, there is a person who I consider most to blame. But ultimately, he had really shitty relationship with his parents. And when it happened, everybody kind of understood. It was the first time I've ever seen people who I've heard say, I don't understand because of how badly society treated him and how hard he was to be around. Like, and it wasn't his fault. Like, in my mind, it was like, well, your parents just didn't try at all, because his dad basically took hands off as soon as they got divorced early into his childhood, and his mom was ultra hands-on, but like this constantly commanding presence, and she's like a psychopath, like a complete psychopath. Nobody could stand to be around her. And like, when it got to a point where that's all he can rely on, because he is so off-putting to everyone else, because his mom has never told him not to act in these ways before he steps outside. She just said, oh, you're autistic, so everybody else has to apologize for you. And he didn't want that. He didn't want everybody to feel like they'd apologize for him. He just didn't understand that what he was doing was super fucking off-putting and weird because he wasn't being told that at home. Because his mom is super fucking off-putting and weird. But she's a narcissist. She was never going to kill herself. She barely felt anything about the fucking thing happening. So yeah, I understand. I understand why he did that. I just wish that there was, well, frankly, I just wish I had been willing to put up with him. And, you know, I always looked at it that, like, I don't know, I didn't expect this, you know? I didn't expect he was going to like, snap and just fuck, and I don't know how intentional it even, like, if he meant to die, but, like, he set himself on fire. And it was just, like, the worst horrifying death possible. And I'm sure I could have done something. Like, if I had just at some point, if I had, when Evan had expressed, like, because I knew Evan had expressed, like, transgender thoughts before, gender dysphoric thoughts before. If I had ever attempted to connect about that, I probably could have done something. But I was so deep in trying to figure it out for myself that I wasn't really trying to reach out to other people about it, and especially not somebody who is difficult to communicate with, you know? But that's a clear example of way too little too late, or nothing too late. And, you know, like, the thought doesn't count. The thought does not count. You have to do something. You have to say something to the bullies. Like, if you're not willing to stand up to a bully, you are worthless. You're just worthless as a human being. If you see somebody taking abuse and you just stand by and let it happen, you are at once the abuser and the abused. You're letting that bully control you, and you are essentially saying that you would rather be a part of the system of oppression than to be a part of the resistance. And that makes you worthless as a human being. You're either the oppressor or the oppressed. And if you choose to have a hands off and stay in the middle, that means that you are both, which is worse than being either one, in my opinion. The way that she talked about being embarrassed by her dad, like, because my dad has told all these stories about me that, like, basically he would see me do something he considered outrageous, and rather than to be like, don't do that, that's embarrassing, he would take it as, like, that I am so, like, don't give a fuck, that I'm, like, so cool and above it all, and he would, like, tell people these stories, like, this is how he sees me. Like, he really identified me by all the weirdest behavior I had, that, like, I wasn't really, like, I always, I guess, kind of tried to play it off cool, you know, because I didn't want to be embarrassed. But, like, I was tremendously embarrassed, you know, and then he would keep bringing up these embarrassing stories all the time. And, like, it's only recently he brought one up to me that he was like, oh, I tell people this story all the time about this time we went to brunch and you were just, like, in this big coat and you looked all fucked up and tired and, like, your hair's all a mess. And I was like, oh, you just don't give a fuck, you know? And I was like, yeah, I was miserable. Like, that sounds like I was having a really, really bad time. Like, I didn't look at myself whatsoever because I was so afraid of what I would see. You know, that's, like, awful, awful, awful. But I'm a deep tier masker, you know, like, but, like, if you see somebody who's never speaking, it means they don't feel safe speaking. It means they think that whatever they say, you're going to make fun of them for. And they're probably right. You know, like, I know I'm going to get made fun of for making this video, for a bunch of shit I said in this, you know, and as I'm editing it, I'm going to be sitting there like, well, where's the line I draw on what was the most ridiculous thing I said that has to be cut out of this video that is insane in premise to begin with. So I chose the word femcel because the word incel has a lot of implications. Racism, loneliness, violence. Elliot Rodger was kind of the face of incels. So this girl is likely to become the face of femcels. Unfortunately, it's not really the way, it's not the mature way to handle this, but neither is this video, so I'm not going to act high and mighty about it. The girl is very racist. Her manifesto, the way she talks about black people, as she calls them with a hard R, is so dehumanizing that it's almost like she didn't even put them in the category of the humanity she was at war with. And she references Indian people in the context of saying that they blow themselves up, and that's what they do, which I did not even know what the fuck she meant by that. No idea what she was referencing, but she admired that about them, apparently. She was really into people who had committed suicide by, killed a bunch of people and killed themselves. In particular, there was a white nationalist, Soviet, or one, I don't remember what, it was one of the used to be a Soviet country. Was it Slovakian? I think it was a Slovakian mass attack. It was a mass stabbing. I don't even remember the details. These were such obscure people that when the manifesto came out, people were like, who the fuck are these people? But what this suggests to me is this girl had done a lot of research into mass shootings because she was ideating it heavily. She saw this as a type of a person that she wanted to be. Mass shooters have become a category of a person. I think they're pretty recognizable, actually. I think when you see the person, actually, the reason I know they're recognizable is because school shootings are why I stopped getting bullied in high school. Because you may know, right now, my hair hasn't been brushed in a couple days because I was camping. This is what my hair looked like through most of high school. Long, unkempt, nappy, and I would not dress this fly. I would be wearing, I don't know, let's go to the schizotypal stuff I got on under, right? Not even this cool. No, this is too cool. The stuff I was wearing in high school was anime and band tees type shit. But at some point I started coming to school in these crazy ass trench coats. As soon as I did that, nobody ever fucked with me again. I had been bullied from pretty much the start to age 14, 15. When I first went through my growth spurt and I started growing facial hair really early, it was a little more hands off. But when people noticed that I was quiet and insecure, they would bully me. But literally the second I put on that trench coat, it became don't come near this person. They're going to shoot up the school. I would hear people say shit like that, And it kind of made me, it was empowering to me in a way, because it's well, at least nobody's going to fuck with me because they think I'll kill them, Which is, it wasn't true for me because I am soft and also not I was the type of person who, again, I felt aged by my experience, what I went through in ages 14, 15, it felt like a fucking epoch, And there's a line in this girl's manifesto where she says, there was a time when I felt young or something like that. She's fucking 15. So I'm just well, okay, you're obviously, that's an insane thing for a 15-year-old to say, but I also understand the perspective of going from I had felt like a kid when I was 13. I felt like I was a child. I had no ideation of becoming an adult. I didn't think that was something I was going to have to face for a really long time. And then when my body changed, I like felt like I was trapped outside of time. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who I was or how to fit in or, what was my place. And my family moved like twice during that period. So it was just like a really dizzying experience that, left a huge mental scar on me. But again, I found resources. I went to my dad's spirituality books. My dad was a type of a respectable person that when he himself went through emotional trouble, went in search of books that could help, went in search of therapy, went in search of medication that could help him. He's been through extensive therapy now. He understands why he was the way he was and is different now. He just bikes obsessively now. I don't know if biking, this, you probably know this bike and how much my dad bikes. When I was a kid, I had super admired my mom because she was creative and she always worked a job, like she always carried her own and was very deeply self-respectful. My mom loves herself. She's kind of narcissistic, but not in like as toxic as the rest of her family. Just a little bit less. And that's something I've been dealing with my whole life is like, to do something like this, all of these school shooters, they're always tremendously narcissistic people. It's always somebody who is obsessed with themselves, they're obsessed with their own mythology, and they feel that the world is wronging them by treating them more poorly than it should be. And most of the time, they're privileged people. Like it's always a white person, almost always, There was the Virginia Tech, and there's a whole book, what the fuck was that book called? The Dead Don't... I don't remember the name of the goddamn book, but it's a pretty good book about that guy's theory as to why a Korean person would have done that. But it's usually a white person. They're usually full of themselves. They usually think that they're not being treated as well as a white person is supposed to be. And that's why they always are racist, because they believe that if somebody has a worse station than them, then it means that that person is just like of a lower class. Like they think that that there is a natural caste system and that they are in the higher echelon but aren't being recognized for it. And this is almost always the case. I really think the only thing that humbled me in my teen years is that there was a period where my parents almost divorced. And this was really what like kind of started me onto the depressive spiral, and then the dysphoria made it much worse because I went through puberty right around the same time. But like in that period, I came to almost lose respect in my parents, but they stuck through it. And so I had a kind of a renewed respect. And also, again, because I was using a lot of the stuff that my dad was using to try to fix himself, to try to fix myself, I felt like there was an opportunity. I felt like there was an opportunity for me to make myself better. And to think that you can make yourself better means to admit that you are not innately great, that you are not like just special. I never thought I was special for any kind of racial reasons because I always grew up around people of all different colors. Say I was born in Oakland technically, but my parents lived on the Anaheim Island, which didn't have a hospital. So I was born in the Oakland hospital. We lived in Anaheim, lived on Treasure Island. My brother was born in San Diego. My dad's from San Jose. My husband is from San Diego. Like, these are very, very Mexican and black places, and my dad was in the Navy. He hadn't realized that like racism was like really bad until he was in the Navy, because where he was from wasn't really racist, I realized it in school because being in Hampton Roads, there's a lot of different races here, but they don't intermingle that much because there's a lot of old white money and then a lot of young black money. And a lot of young Asian money and young African money, you know, and like really from all over the world. And there's just more segregate, like more self-segregation here than there is in California, among the population. So I saw the racism happening around me, but I wasn't participating in it because my friends were mostly people of color in pretty much all through growing up. You know, I had some white friends, but usually they were gay. I didn't know it at the time, but most of my friends turned out to be gay. I just didn't know, you know, because I was hyper in denial about that stuff myself. You know, I didn't recognize myself as a trans woman until substantially later than I should have. Most of the people that I ended up being friends with or who I surrounded myself with growing up, they were in worse situations than mine in the sense that my dad was very successful selling cars. And so he was always, you know, making more and more money year after year. And he always outfitted our house with nice things. So because he spent his money, you know, was spending way too much money, people always saw us as like having cool shit and wanted to spend time at our house, you know. And my parents were super lax. They kind of let you do whatever you want, say whatever you want, you know. So people loved being around my house because it was a less strict environment and with much more, you know, stuff, especially video games. Like we always had games, you know. So it was easy to want to spend time around us if you wanted access to that stuff. And I, you know, somewhat understood that, but I didn't understand as a kid how much people were kind of straining themselves to be around me to get access to that stuff. And like a lot of the people who I was like friends with were really my brother's friends. You know, like my brother Victor is a year and a half younger than me. And so oftentimes whoever he had around, you know, was kind of somebody who I would end up spending a lot of time with, but just because they happened to be his friend, you know? And the people who were my friends usually weren't around as much and were, you know, had more strained relationships with me because they couldn't put up with certain aspects of my attitude, which in retrospect, like I, you know, used to be so dissociated and like so confused about the way that other people interact that like I would struggle to be around, you know, a teenage version of myself because I've now met teenagers who are like how I was and I'm like, oh man, you know, like I have no idea what's going on in your head, but I know you must be swimming in it, you know. So why did I decide to make a video about this? Because being as desensitized to this as any other American, the thing that caught me is that it's a girl. Like, this doesn't happen. School shootings are not usually perpetrated by girls. And yet, everything about her is exactly like all the guys who've done it. And it's so uncanny that, of course, right-wingers were immediately trying to pin it on trans people. But nope, she's actually a neo-Nazi, as they usually are, because who else thinks that they're trans people don't think we're powerful. We don't go out and shoot people. We are weaklings who cower in fear. Like, I'm like the bravest fucking trans person who's ever existed. And I spend all of my time in a garage. Like, you know, there's not a lot. We don't go out and do crazy things. I was so pain averse as a kid. My first suicide attempt was I tried to put clothespins on my nose and mouth because I wanted to suffocate myself, and it hurt too much, so I took them off after like 35 seconds. That's a suicide attempt. That's why I can't have life insurance, is because I told my therapist about that when I was 20. We live in a fucked up system that really weaponizes all of your neurodivergence against you. Like anything that makes you different, you're going to be reminded about it through advertising, through media, through other people reinforcing what they see in advertising and media as the ideal. And it's the worst in school. Personally, I would abolish public schools. Elect me president. I'm going to change it. I'll just change it all. I'm going to make it different. It's not going to be that. It's going to be a different thing. It'll be a new thing. There'll be a thing. There'll still be a thing. Your kids can still go to a place and you don't have to worry about them all day. It's not going to be this thing. This thing is demonic. This thing creates this situation because it creates this incredibly dehumanizing culture of, like, we're calling it education, but it's mostly about sending kids off for 8 hours a day. Like, it doesn't function as education very well. It never has. It's more about programming. It's more about, like, getting people used to the rhythm of what a workday is like and just turning people into machines. And if you don't fit as a cog in that machine, you break, and you probably are going to break the machine with you. And that's what we see happening here is these people break, and then they say, I'm not going to let myself be the only gear that gets churned out of this fucking thing. You know, this machine is evil. I'm going to blow it up with me. She quoted the Unabomber at the end of her manifesto, Ted Kaczynski. She quoted Ted Kaczynski at the end of her fucking... It's a 15-year-old. She's not supposed to know about these things. You keep teaching the children about the mass shooters. And not in the way I'm doing it, where you're like making them seem like dumb little children like they are. You're like lionizing them in their beliefs. It's just like basic shit. It's just narcissism. It's just young narcissistic people who get bullied and decide to make it everybody else's problem. And like, if they can manage to find any amount of leverage in society, they just turn into Karens. Like, these are the exact same people that are Karens. But Karens got something they wanted somewhere along the line. They had some kind of power. You know, they got their parents to buy them the things they wanted. And their parents never became broke and stopped being able to buy them what they wanted. Or they never became degenerates. Or they never stopped working, you know, stopped being respectable. So they just, you know, but they still have all the same attitude. But a Karen is better than a school shooter. Can we at least reduce them down to Karens? The male ones too, obviously, are Karens. Can we just reduce them to, like, just regular assholes that we all can make fun of on TikTok instead of people who are killing children? Obviously, the easy access to guns is a problem as well in America. And she literally said that she, like, lied and coerced her father to, like, get the gun. I don't know what the full story is there. I don't know if the police will ever investigate that or release that information. I'm sure it's being looked into. But, you know, it probably shouldn't be so easy for a disgruntled 15-year-old to get a handgun. But I'm less interested in that part of the conversation than I am in the fact... I mean, the guy she admired the most stabbed people to death. Like, her favorite guy who she considered... I can't pronounce his fucking name. The guy who she regarded as, like, a angel come to earth or whatever was literally just, like, a racist dude who stabbed a bunch of guys, you know? Like, and then killed himself. That was her hero. That was her knight in shining armor. Her boyfriend knew how much she liked this guy. Red flag. If your girlfriend is talking about how much she likes mass shooters, call her dad and shout at him. Tell her dad that he needs to release custody of his child because he can't take care of her. If I had to put into words what I think is holding society back right now, it is a general unwillingness to set boundaries or to respect boundaries. That people have, like, such an all or nothing relationship to boundaries that there's always either, like, a total acceptance or a total rejection, and anything gray is, like, unromantic. Basically, like, people feel as though they have to be in this, like, hyper real state because they've seen other people in it, or at least pretending to be in it, and that stuff gets pushed into your face because it's like exalting to think about, but it's not real in most contexts. You're just not set up for it, like, and it's not something you can manifest just by wanting it. It might not ever happen to you, and not for any fault of your own. But you can't just like try to make your life into something that has no gray zone, where everything is either perfect or shit, and like I've seen people who get walked all over because they never say no, and I've seen people who kind of reject things that maybe they don't even mean to, just because it's complicated to deal with. And I think that's like, if I had to make an ask, and it's hard to ask this of like fucking teenagers, but this is who the problem is with, is like, you need to have the will to look at people with nuance. And it's hard because you don't probably understand. The fucking school's not teaching you any of this shit. It's not teaching you anything useful. It's not teaching you psychology. It's not teaching you philosophy. It's not teaching you culture. It's not teaching you how to communicate with the fucking people around you. They're like, all right, form a group and do this assignment. And then I'm like staring at the other people in the group while they all talk to each other. That was a lot of my high school group experience, like, nobody taught me how to participate in that conversation. So I think that a lot of these people, when she described herself as quiet in her manifesto, she said, like, I'm a quiet person and people bully me for being quiet. And I got that too, where was just like blank for a lot of my childhood. Like, I didn't know how to respond to things, and I'm kind of slow. Like, I talk fast in my videos, but it's because I'm always talking about something I've been thinking about all day. It's never like an original thought. Every time I pause the camera, I'm like going to try to remember what was another thing I wanted to say, but it's all pre-planned. If you just ask me a question, I'm gonna have to think for a second. And this girl called herself slow. She said that she felt like she was not intelligent. And yet, always these people are writers, which is interesting to me because most people can't fucking write at all. Like, not even at this level of lucidity. And I'm not saying she was like a competent writer necessarily. I understood what she was saying, though. I think she was probably better than I was at her age, and I already considered myself a writer at that age. So if she had regarded herself as somebody with a talented capacity, then things would probably have been different. When I was her age, I thought I was a writer because my dad, who I respected, had told me that he liked my writing. And the reason I respected my dad's opinion on that is because he had written a poetry book, some of which I had enjoyed like a year before, So for me, creativity was to follow in the footsteps of these parents that I admire. This girl did not have that. She had a dad who made fun of her for everything about her and saw no value in what she was doing. And she probably regarded her ability to write as just a normal thing, like not anything special. Whereas to me, the fact that somebody even can write at all, to a level where I understand what they're saying. And she's making all these far-flung references that, like, while it's obvious to see, like, where her obsessions were as, like, in the time that she'd been consciously using the internet and being mad at humanity, she had just binged everything that's angry at humanity. But the fact that she pulled together the frame of reference that she did inside of 6 pages, enough that I got her whole worldview, that's decent writing. She said some things in there that I would definitely have cut. Definitely didn't need to be said and shouldn't have been thought in the first place. Particularly about people of races other than hers. Thinking back on it, like, I'm trying to remember, when was I like the most violent? Like, when did I ever think I would kill like a classmate or something? And really it was in the 3rd grade when I first really started getting bullied because there was somebody who was like really targeting me, and I knew they were targeting me, and I didn't understand why at all. And in retrospect, it buried gay, definitely had to be. Only reason that makes sense, based on everything I know about psychology now. Because I was incredibly effeminate at the time and very quiet and demure. And I really thought, like, I want that kid to fucking die. Like, at the time, I was like, I hope this kid fucking dies. You know, I don't know why he's doing this to me. I just fucking hope he dies. Because I didn't know who to tell about it. Like, and I should have told my parents, but I didn't know, like, what they could do about it. You know, like, I didn't know how to explain the situation. And I didn't want to start by being like, I got in trouble at school because somebody else wrote in my... No, this kid had drawn in his own yearbook a bunch of like bullying of himself that he claimed I had done or something. And like when the teacher saw me just blank faced, not understand what the fuck was going on, she just dismissed the situation basically. And I didn't like... She didn't press it further or like investigate or ask me more. I mean, I literally didn't know how to talk, like, at that age. Like, I knew how to write a little bit, but I didn't know how to talk very well. So, I didn't know how to explain any of this shit. And discovering writing, like, is the only way I was able to finally... Like, I couldn't tell my parents I was depressed until I was 21 when I wrote them, like, a long letter and then rode my bike to the hospital and was like, I'm going to put myself on suicide watch. Come find me. You know, I didn't actually end up doing it. I just sat in the lobby. But, like, you know, I spent, like, ages 8 to 21, like, fairly suicidal. And then when I saw a therapist who kind of sucked and eventually crashed a plane and died. And he, put me with a psychiatrist who kind of sucked. And eventually his building got torn down. And they put me on Wellbutrin, and Wellbutrin gave me a blinking problem and made me realize that even if I don't do anything, nothing will change. Like, I won't die. Like, I won't just die from not doing anything. I could just not doing anything and it would be fine. And I stopped being suicidal. Every once in a while, when my tooth pain or my back pain, like today, gets really bad, I'm like, fuck, I'm probably not gonna last to 90, Like, if this pain is this bad now and I don't find a way to fix it before then, then I don't know. But it's not like a present tense thing. I'm hopeful that I will find a way to do something about it, that I will find a way to fix myself, But again, that requires thinking you suck. Like, I had to think I suck before I wanted to fix myself. I had to think, oh, wow, I really fucked up. I had to think, oh, wow, I have to take all these L's, And then I'm going to get back out there and I'm going to go be a better person. And if you don't think that that opportunity exists for you because nobody is offering it to you, then, and like, I feel hopeless sometimes because, like, I struggle so much to reach out. Like, again, it's so hard for me to speak, except when I'm like riled up on a subject like this, when I'm emotional about something that, like, I'm always kind of waiting for people to reach out to me. And people do, because I've made myself a presence. Like, I've gone out of my way to not only establish myself as somebody who can help you understand yourself better by hearing me talk about myself, but also as somebody who needs to hear your feedback. Because if I don't hear your feedback, I'm just talking to myself, And that feedback can be negative, it can be positive, but I just value the experience of, like, getting the feedback, of, like, being in I don't have to be in a place where everybody loves me. I just have to be in a place where people are understanding what I'm saying and responding, The most recent video I made got a lot of negative feedback that I expected and I was happy about because it was the feedback I expected, There was some negative feedback that was just bullying me about my teeth, and I've got another whole video I'm going to make about that. I recorded that earlier today, but this was more pressing. So I wanted to do this one first. You get this one out first because I want to beat all the other opinion pieces to the punch, quite frankly, because I think my perspective is more valuable than a lot of the ones you're going to hear. A lot of the right-wing psychopaths who are going to try to spin this into some kind of agenda, I just want my perspective to come out first because I think I have more insight into this than most people because obviously from the way I'm speaking right now, I am a narcissist, but I understand how to tame the narcissism, which is through being humble. Just be a fan of Kendrick Lamar. You know, as long as you are intelligent enough to realize that you should really be listening to black people and not white people, then you will be safe. You have to keep your mind safe by not listening to white people. That is the most important. If you want to end up dead, listen to neo-Nazis. If you want to stay alive and save everyone around you, listen to Kendrick Lamar and Killer Mike. And, you know, people who actually know what the fuck is going on in America. And definitely not people in a fucking country you've never heard of, you know, and whose names you could not possibly pronounce. There's no way she could pronounce that motherfucker's name unless she was practicing it in front of a mirror, which she might have been. I could get more into, like, I've known people who, like, self-identified as femcels and who would say they relate to a girl like this but weren't, and that's like the reason that they never did something like this is because they were that much more outgoing, that much prettier, that much more willing to, you know, like have those tragic interactions because they were somewhat humbled. And the person I'm thinking of, it's like probably would lionize a character like this as a cultural figure, which is, you know, like what I'm worried about happening. So that's why I want to speak out and be like, this is not an admirable type of a person at all. I feel like that should be obvious, but I know it's not to everybody. You know, being understandable doesn't make you admirable. But what I want you to do is if you see someone like this, please try to make friends with them and simply change their fucking mind. I know it's hard, and you don't owe it to anybody, but it will make the future better. It's you. This isn't me like saying you should feel guilty if you don't do this. You should not feel guilty at all if you don't do this. Deal with your own shit first. But if you have the strength and capacity to reach out to somebody who is being bullied, do it. Because it always helps. People reach out to me all the time. And now, every time somebody bullies me, I publicly broadcast it just so that I can get all my friends to laugh at it with me. You know, like, people leave a shitty comment on my channel, 9 times out of 10, I screen cap it and I post it on Twitter. And then I get a ton of likes and engagement. Pretty much the most engagement I get is me making fun of people who leave shitty comments. And then I get a flood of support for it because I'm basically just taking it over to my support network and showing it to them, you know? So, like, and that's fun for me. It's just like a fun thing to be like, hey, this guy talked shit about me, so now me and all my friends are going to laugh at the type of person we imagine them to be, which is someone like this, some fucking little school shooter, you know? But, like, I also run the risk of, like, bullying these people, you know, into doing it. But I honestly think that, like, the level of response I give is usually so much more than anyone's used to that I usually create fans out of. Like, I've had plenty of people I've walked back from being incels, you know, like, I'm like the Japanese government when it comes to encouraging, like, anime fans to go fuck, you know? I'm like, hey, first of all, transition. Second of all, suck that dick, you know? We're in my dad's office now. That is also my office when he's not using it. I filled up my phone And I'm going to end up filling up my computer if this goes on too much longer. I will probably have cut some of this. It's still probably incredibly long, but I have to get into why I think femcels are just now becoming to this level where they're committing mass shootings. And I think it's because we're in the first period where white women feel as threatened as like any other class of people does. At least, you know, young ones who maybe haven't like realized the power threshold that they could be wielding just through like being a white woman. Like historically, like women, if they're in any way attractive, like even slightly, someone is going to fight for them. Like, just men are like so desperate to identify themselves through the fact that they take care of a woman that they will always pick up the scraps, you know, like, and sometimes those relationships don't work out and stuff, but like just like any other incel, she hadn't gotten to that point yet. Like she had a boyfriend, but it's somebody from another country who she's never met and has been, you know, texting with for 2 years, but it doesn't seem like they had really communicated that much. And you know, she didn't, by her own description, wasn't much of a communicator anyways, and it seems like she was mostly dealing with her own shit at home and at school. So, you know, even though she might have been like a little further along than most male incels were, she still falls heavily into all of the same behavior patterns that those guys have of feeling privileged to their own like whiteness, feeling like basically feeling that because they are like decent looking and white that they are supposed to have more. Like they think that the world is a caste system, that they are in the higher caste and that nobody's recognizing it, as I said earlier. So they feel like, why am I not getting what the world owes me, you know? And obviously this isn't all of history. There have been periods of time where women were super blamed and were like, you know, slaughtered en masse. But this is a period, there hasn't been a lot of periods throughout history where women were like feeling as though they had to take vengeance on society for not giving them what they were owed by birthright. That's a very male pattern behavior. And so I look at this and I see, you know, well, in the same way that a lot of the white incels who go on these rampages are upset that, you know, that men of other races are competitive with them, that they, you know, they feel as though like, oh, I can't believe people who I think are inferior by nature are succeeding more than me, you know. And it's never just limited to racism. Usually they also hate people of their own race because they always hate their parents and they always hate their classmates and their teachers who bully them. And usually they don't really have that much of a relationship with other races, which is why they are so racist, is that they don't know any people of other races. They just make assumptions about them based on what the people around them are saying and what the internet is saying, you know? But like, again, it's rare that a woman is so dissatisfied that she reaches the state of, you know, murdering people. And you know, when it first happened, my instinct was to think, oh, like, well, a handsome guy just committed a like a crime, but it wasn't even him. It wasn't Luigi. It was, you know, other relatively good-looking guys from foreign countries doing it with you know, with more clear ideological reasons that she aligned herself with, that she was hoping to, you know, to parrot somewhat in her action, even though her act was actually less ideologically motivated, seemingly, than the people she looks up to. But she was just like so done with life that she was like, well, it has to end now. You know, I'm not waiting around until I have like a message. I have to die. And I'm gonna take people with me. And you know, the only reason I think that her rampage wasn't more serious is like she did not have access to more weaponry or the ability to wield something larger, you know, like, ultimately it's, there were limitations to what she could get away with as a 15-year-old girl, but again, it's the fact that this is now something that, like, I mean, obviously school shootings being normalized to this level also is creating a lot more of them. So, roll the dice enough times, there was going to come up a girl eventually. But the fact that her ideology is so exactly the same as every other incel, and meanwhile, you've got people like Elon Musk, like, literally threatening, like, womanhood with, well, AI is going to be better at being a woman than any of you, so, womanhood's over, and then women getting insecure about trans women, women getting insecure, white women getting insecure about women of color growing more influential in pop culture. I just think that, I don't think this is going to be the last racist young woman who shoots up a school if things don't change. Um, so, it was a surprise to me, but not in the sense that I didn't understand it. It was more like, oh my God, we arrived at a place that I always, like, I guess subconsciously knew we could be, but like actually being there is like, wow. And it makes me want to draw more attention to it because I'm hoping more people will pay attention. Like, the fact that this is a statistical anomaly will draw more attention to it. Middle America, now it's a tragedy. Now it's a sad to see an upper class city having this happening again. Um, I'm just kind of taking advantage of that to use my perspective to make a statement about this, and also to make it clear that it's not just a boys club. This whole mentality is not just a guy thing. It's a racist thing, it's a narcissistic thing, it's a privileged thing, and it's a bad parenting thing first and foremost. It's also a systemic thing. It's a school thing, because school is evil. I will remind you again, I am not for public school, as it is. So, yeah, alright. That's everything I have to say about this. This is way too long. Okay, I've been Trixie the Golden Witch and Deep Peace Figment, collaborating to bring you this incredibly schizophrenic and deeply troubling analysis of the manifesto of the Madison school shooter. Don't shoot anybody. Listen to Jeremy by Pearl Jam until you feel like a living cliche, and then get back to the desk job like the rest of us freaks. I do work a desk job. I just work it at home. Same as my dad. If you really hate your parents, run away. I think that girl, the saddest thing to me in her message was that she quoted this Unabomber line that's about going out into the wilderness and, like, being at peace. And I was like, why didn't you fucking do that, idiot? Why didn't you just go outside and be at peace? Why did you go to school and kill people? What the fuck are you thinking?